to the Language Fuel podcast. Our mission is to fuel the teaching and learning of languages worldwide. I'm your host, Joanna Smith. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Language Fuel podcast. We are up to episode number 28. Thanks for joining us. Today, I'd like to talk about the transferable skills that language teachers have. Now, you might think, why on earth would I want to talk about that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, in terms of the young people who might be listening to this podcast, maybe people just starting out on their journey, a lot of people go traveling and as a way to travel, they get a job teaching English, but they've actually got not necessarily a whole bunch of training. So they're actually thinking, should I do this for a career or not? So I wanted to encourage people in that category to say, yes, absolutely, because if you continue down this track, you're going to gain a bunch of skills that even if you did change careers later, you'll be able to apply those to any work circumstance. So that's the first group that I'm thinking about. The second group that I'm thinking about are those teachers who maybe have been here a little bit too long. And if you're in this category, you know who you are. You've been teaching for a number of years now, and you're thinking, I don't really want to do this anymore, but what else can a teacher do? Well, I'm here to encourage you that you have a ton of skills that you've learned over the years, and don't be scared of branching out to quite a different career because a number of your skills are definitely transferable. And the thing about transferable skills, which I learned myself when I left teaching a few years ago to join the corporate world, often you don't realize that you have these skills, and it's only when you see that other people don't have these skills that you value what you can do. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time thinking about this for those who are in either of those camps. So I'm thinking there are 4 different categories of skills that you gain as a teacher and that you learn and really hone over time. The first one is organization skills. You have deadlines every day. They're called classes. So in order to be ready for your class, you have to have done your planning. You have to have done the marking for any assessments or homework from previous class, and maybe reporting on students if that's what your school does, all ready for the next time. You've got timetables that have very quick turnaround. You can't say, well, I'm not quite ready for my 10 o'clock class. Too bad. 10 o'clock comes around, your class is sitting there. What are you going to do? So teachers are very good at, working towards a deadline and having it done. So that's a fantastic skill, actually. In terms of organization, you're also good with working with other people. When you just work by yourself, you can kind of be a little bit loose and flexible with the old organization systems and filing systems. But typically teachers, they're sharing resources amongst the same level, or sharing a resource room, and you need to keep things very organized, otherwise nobody else is going to be able to find what they need. And I'm thinking of physical resources like filing and books on shelves and things like that, as well as the digital resources, so electronic files and things like that. So definitely working in a team with other teachers and understanding about being organized is definitely something you learn. And also organizing in terms of a curriculum design. You're organizing information, if you like. So trying to understand which order should this information be presented in so that my students can make the most sense of it, so that the travel through time that you're bringing students along that journey is something that teachers often are good at thinking about, breaking down information logically and being organized in the way that they present that. And then the final organization skill is just really understanding rhythms. So typically an academic year will have a beginning, it'll have some assessments at the end and reporting, and then there may be broken up into semesters or into terms. And so teachers are very conscious of the rhythms of the year as it goes through, and understand that sometimes workload is a bit higher and sometimes it's a bit lesser, and can kind of work through that. In corporations and other companies, it's the same too. There might be busy seasons and down seasons, but not everyone's necessarily aware of that and conscious of, planning ahead to reach that, whereas teachers are very good at that. They understand that. The second category of skills that you learn and really fine-tune as a teacher are people skills, absolutely people skills. So particularly when you're teaching a language, if you're teaching a language to people who don't speak your language, so I'm thinking of English teachers teaching migrants the language of the country they're living in, for example, you become incredibly good at understanding people who have very little language. So you're watching out for body language, for facial expressions, and all sorts of mimes and gestures. And, you can really go a long way when you pay attention to those things. You learn about motivation. What motivates students to do an activity or not? There's nothing worse than saying, right, students, we're going to do this, and nobody does anything. So that'll happen a few times earlier in your career, and then you'll figure out what's going to motivate the particular group of students that you have sitting in your room there. So understanding, what people are interested in not. Understanding group dynamics is massive. That is something that all teachers, whether language teachers or not, really become good at. So there's things like keeping energy levels up in the class. Every group needs to warm up to itself, and most teachers prepare a warmer exercise at the beginning of each lesson, or perhaps at the beginning of the day, depending on how long you have students for, and that gets people energized and talking to one another and mixing that they just wouldn't do otherwise. So there's nothing worse than having a class that's quiet, doesn't want to mix, doesn't want to do anything. So teachers become very good at bringing a bit of energy and having activities that get people, warmed up to one another. Understanding how the energy needs change throughout a lesson. You can't do the same type of activity for a very long time. You need to mix it up. So do a group activity, do an individual activity, do a loud activity, do a quiet activity. All of these sort of energy changes have to happen throughout the lesson, and it needs to be interesting, or else your class will be very bored. So again, teachers become very good at intuiting when the energy needs to change in a classroom, and eventually planning for it and having a very good instinct for that. And also, just in terms of people skills, really learning about how people learn, of course. So the kinds of things, how does the human memory work? How often do you need to repeat something until somebody actually really gets it? And of course, it's different for different people, but in general, knowing that you do need to repeat it rather than just, but I told them that before, how come they don't know it? And again, like I said a bit earlier on in this episode, people who haven't had that experience teaching a group don't know these things. And so I have heard people say things like, but I've already told them that. Why don't they know it? Well, because they're human. That's exactly why. So those are some of the people skills that you learn as a language teacher. The third category of skills that you learn is personal skills for yourself. So I'm thinking in particular of confidence. A teacher, a language teacher, has to be in front of a class. You've got to stand up in front of people. You've got to present. You've got to hang out with and spend time with people who you may not normally choose to spend time with. So you just have to get over any stereotypes you may have, any previous bad experiences you may have had. Start fresh again with a new group of people. Every term or every semester, there's another group to get to know. So you end up learning how to, meet people, break the ice, how to be friendly, and so on. So super, super good for developing confidence as in your personal skills. Another kind of personal skills is presentation skills, of course. You learn things like when you're presenting information to a group of people, you don't talk to the whiteboard. And again, it sounds kind of obvious if you've been teaching for a while, but again, you'd be so surprised at how many people in the corporate world will write something on the whiteboard and talk to the whiteboard as they're writing. And you can't hear them. You can't see their face. You can't, see their voice, their facial expressions. And I think, oh, wow, don't they know this? And no, they don't actually. So, some of these presentation skills are what you learn in the classroom. Eye contact, making eye contact with a group of people as you're presenting information. Using a screen that's not just full of words, especially language teachers know that students are not going to understand it. So it's never good practice, whether in your first language or a second language, to just have a whole screen full of words. We want to be using images and things which convey meaning that don't rely on words. You learn quickly that it's important to speak clearly and slowly. for people who are learning a language. And that's the same with presenting anything. The more nervous you are, the faster you'll speak. So developing those skills of speaking slowly and clearly is fantastic. And of course, in your handouts, when you're presenting something and you're giving learners something to take away, your information needs to be presented succinctly or efficiently. This is a true story, and this is not that long ago. I saw somebody get a handout together for their company, and it was a whole first page full of words, and then there was 2 lines on the second page. So they're copying this 50 times, and they have to have 2 pages per person. And I'm thinking, you can edit that so that all of the information is on the 1 page. It seemed so obvious to me, but this person never thought twice about it. So again, just through experience, these are the things you'll pick up. So in terms of personal skills, we've talked about confidence and presentation skills. And the last personal skill that I've got noted here is creativity. You have to present so many times. You're not going to present it the same way each time. That very quickly gets boring and your learners will lose interest. So you become very creative at the way that you present information. It's not always with a handout. It's not always with a PowerPoint, or it's not always with a video. I mean, there's a number of ways you can present things, and teachers, language teachers in particular, because they can't rely on words, become very creative in the way that they present information and meaning. And of course, activities as well, being creative with designing activities for practicing the language. Language learning is a behavior that needs to be practiced over and over again. There are physical skills and movements of the mouth and the tongue that need to just happen again and again and again. How do you design activities so that your learners don't get bored while achieving the repetition that you need? So those are some things that you just pick up along the way, because you're doing it so often, and you're reading, books on ideas and things like that. So wonderful, wonderful personal skills to learn from being a language teacher. And the final category of skills that I've noted here is, of course, language skills. You'll actually learn a lot about your own language, whether you're teaching it or teaching a second language. There will be things that you didn't realize before. Most of language learning, when we do it in our first language, in other words, as a child, as a toddler, it's so subconscious. We're not aware of the grammar rules and the pronunciation rules and all sorts of other wonderful linguistic patterns. Our brains just absorb it and figure it all out for us, which is great, so that when you're 2, you can start speaking in sentences. But as an adult, when you then have to present language and teach others, you suddenly become conscious of these beautiful patterns. And I think it's just invigorating and wonderful to think that our brains did all of this automatically for us as an infant. So that's really exciting. You learn about psychological issues around learning a language and the second language acquisition theories. You learn about different ways that language can vary from one another. So if you're teaching a group who all speak the same first language, you'll see the types of errors that they're making that come from their first language, and realize that, gosh, this aspect of the target language is actually quite different from the first language that my students speak. And so you'll become aware of the differences in language. So those are 4 categories of skills that you really hone as you spend time being a language teacher. And I really encourage anyone to give it a go. If you're thinking about it, why not? It really doesn't hurt to try. You can do it for a few years. Of course, at the very start, when you begin, you're not going to have all of these skills. And it takes a few mistakes until you realize you need to develop those skills. So you will have your ups and downs. Of course, not every day is a fun day, but that's the same in any job. And I highly recommend attending any professional development opportunities that are afforded to you at the institution you work for. Of course, if you don't have opportunities to attend professional development seminars or to read up in research journals or get books, then obviously I'm going to recommend to you the Language Fuel Academy. We've got a bunch of courses that we're developing. Several are already published now, and there's more always in the pipeline. So check out what we have on offer. Our goal, of course, is to encourage the teaching and, of course, the learning of different languages around the world. So as much as we can help you do a great job at being a language teacher, we are fulfilling our mission. So that is about it. That's all I have to say today. Don't be afraid of just diving in, do your best, learn all these wonderful, wonderful skills. And if ever it comes a time where you feel like you've had enough, you haven't got enough energy to continue to be creative and put in the work to have fun in the class, then maybe it is time to go. But realize that you have developed a bunch of skills that can be used in many different environments. So be encouraged. I hope you have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time. Ka kite anō. Thank you for listening to the Language Fuel podcast. You can navigate to the show notes and links via our homepage at www.languagefuel.com. See you next time.